Hello and welcome to this YouTube channel again. Today we want to look at this question. How do I select a subset of a data frame? Now you recall that in the previous video we looked at how you can read and write tabular data in pandas. So this is what we want to look at today. And for us to do that again, we'll continue from where we left off. We'll create a Jupyter notebook for today's class. And so for that, I will go to File, New Notebook in Drive. It opens this for me. So I'm just going to call this Select Subset of Data Frame. Okay, I hit the enter button and so I have this. Now, if you recall, what's the first thing we said you have to do? Since you're working with pandas and you want to do some data exploration, what's the first thing? Can you still remember? Import pandas as PD and shift enter to run that. Let me zoom in a bit so that you can see what I'm typing. And yes, we're set. As you can see the tick mark here. Okay. Now the last time we were looking at this Titanic data, and again I'll leave the link to the data in the description. And if you want to know how to upload and work with that data set, just look at the previous video where we talked about how to read and write tabular data. You'll get more information about that. For now, what I want to do is to just go back into the drive. I'm going to mount the drive here because this is a new workspace. This is a new Jupyter notebook. So I'm going to mount the drive, connect to Google Drive. Now it's mounting the Google Drive. Once it's done, I'll see this drive here. I'll click on the drop-down menu. I'll click on that drop down, click on the drop down there. And where I'm going to is this data here because I need this data set. I need this data set, titanic.csv. And the way to do that is by navigating to where that titanic.csv is stored. I'll click on these three dots and I'll copy path. Once I'm done with that, I'll close this. And the next thing would be to read in that data. I'm going to store it in a variable name called titanic.pd.read pd.read_csv. And I'm going to have quotes. I will paste what I just copied now into that space. And I'll use the shift enter again. And as you can see, the fact that we have no error means that yes, we can now access this Titanic data frame. And if I do titanic.ed, if you still recall, what does this give us? The first 5 rows of the data. And let me zoom in, zoom out so that you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what we get by reading the head. And if you still remember, we said if you want to look at the last 5 rows, what do? Tail rather than head. All right, let's continue. So the question we want to look at today is, how do I select a subset of a data frame? So this is a big question we want to look at. And because it's a big question, I'm going to have it this way. Or even just one of that. Okay. So for us to look at this, we'll start by looking at how we can select specific columns from a data frame. So the question here is, how do I select specific columns from a data frame. All right, so this is a question we want to look at now. And to do this, let's say I'm interested in the age of the Titanic passengers. All right, this is what I'm interested in. Now I have the entire data set, but I'm interested in just the age. As you can see, this is the age here. I'm interested in only this column, just this column. How do we do that in pandas? So we can assign this to variable called ages, and we call that Titanic data frame, and we use this square bracket with the name of the column. So this age here is what you see here. And that's how I'm going to select it. Now, it's good to note that you can see this is an uppercase A. It is case sensitive. And so I can't have an uppercase A here and then come down here and have a lowercase a. It's not going to work. So this is how you select a single column. And if we run this, you won't see anything. Yes, that's because it just assigns the result from this into this variable. And so to get the first 5 again, we can say ages.head. And you can see here, we have the first 5 ages of the Titanic passengers. As you can see, the data type here, it's float. Now, each column in a data frame is a series. I think we talked about this some time ago. So this survived is a series. A single column here is a series. P class is a series. Name is a series. Once it gets more than one, if it becomes more than one column that we are looking at, then that's no longer a series. It becomes a data frame. I hope that is clear. That's the difference between, it's one of the differences between data frame and series. A single column of a data frame is referred to as a series. And so the type of data that is returned here is actually a series. And just to prove that, we can do something like this. Say type of, we can say type of ages. Now, as you can see here, we have this pandas.core.series.series. So this is a series. And again, we can also pass it directly in this place by saying Titanic and then that square bracket and age. And if I run it, I get the same value, the same result. So as you can see, it says it's a one-dimensional ND array with axis label. So that's exactly what it is. It's just a one-dimensional array. Now, we can also look at the shape of this output. And so let's take a look at the shape. We can say Titanic, then age dot shape. As you can see, we have 891. And as you can see, because this is just a single, this is a series, we didn't need to consider the number of columns, right? But we have the number of rows that exist in that series. I hope that's clear. Now, but if you also notice this, shape doesn't have parentheses. What do you think this is a type of? You remember we talked about the differences between attributes and methods, right? Shape is also an attribute, and that's why it doesn't have parentheses. And I've explained the differences between attributes and methods in the previous video. So if you haven't watched that video, I suggest you watch that first and then continue from here. Now, so DataFrame.shape is an attribute of a Panda series and data frame containing the number of rows and the number of columns. And a Panda series is one-dimensional, and so only the number of rows is returned, just as I earlier explained. because this is a one-dimensional array. It's just a number of rows that gets returned to us. Now let's say that now I'm interested in the age and sex of the Titanic passengers. Okay, so I'm interested in the age and sex of the Titanic passengers. How do I go about this? Now, if you notice now, we have two different things. We're not just looking at the age. We're not just looking at the age, which would be in itself a series, right? Because it's just a single column. Now we are looking at the age and the sex. So how do we select these two columns? Now, to select multiple columns, we use a list of column names within the selection bracket. And so that selection bracket you see there, which is this square bracket, it's a constant thing that we would always have. But depending on what you want to select, so for instance, we can say age sex equal to Titanic, and then we have that square bracket. Remember that if we're looking at just one column, we would have just chosen that column now, right? But now we're considering two different columns, and because of that, we need to enclose that in another square bracket. And this square bracket now is just a list of columns that we want to explore. And in this case, we want to look at the age and we want to look at the sex. So once we do this, we can run that cell and then look at the age underscore sex dot head and see what we have here. As you can see, we have the age and we have the sex, right? So how do we know the data type that we've used here? I mean, again, you recall that we said that a single column is series, right? So what is this? Is this data frame or it's a series? Now, it's easy for us to know now because we've established that the difference between a series and data frame is that a series is just a single, it's a single column. It's a one-dimensional array. Once it's more than one, it becomes a data frame. And let's confirm that by, again, looking at the type. So we can say type of Titanic, and we look at the age, and comma, we look at the sex. So if we run this, as you can see, we have a data frame. And if you look at the definition here, it's a two-dimensional size mutable potentially heterogeneous tabular data. Now, so the selection returned, let's look at the shape. Let's say, how about the shape? And for us to do that again, we can run Titanic, square bracket, quote, comma, quote, sex dot shape. Again, remember, shape is an attribute, not a method. And so we don't have parentheses in front of that. So you can see now, because we have two columns, we have two here, and we still have 891 rows. And so it returns 891 rows and two columns. And remember that data frame is two-dimensional with both a row and column dimension. And that's why we have this row and column. All right, I can't stress that enough because that's going to be very important as we move along. So now we've looked at how to filter specific columns. And I just want to add that you can select as many as you want here. It's not just two. So we can add more columns to it. So if you want to look at the name of that particular passenger, we can say, okay, we want to know the name, the age, and the sex. So here we can just have something like name, right? And if we run this now, and we run this, you can see the name, the age, and the sex. So you can pass in as many column names as you want here. Okay, I hope that's clear, but if there's anything you don't understand, just please let me know in the comment section. So the next question we want to look at is, now we've considered how to select specific columns. Now let's look at how to filter. So the question we want to ask ourselves here is, how do I filter specific rows from a data frame? So this is the question we want to look at in this section. Now let's say that I'm interested in the passengers older than 35 years. How do we do this? Now, you recall that when we were selecting columns, all we needed was just a particular column, right? But in this case, if you look at this question that what we're interested in, it's passengers that are older than 35 years. And the next question you'd want to ask yourself is, what column would I need to really give me this result? How do I know passengers that are older than 35? What column do I need to look at? Definitely the age. I can't look at the sex to tell me if that person is older than 35. The name of the person will not tell me if the person is older than 35 years, right? And so if I say I'm interested in passengers that are older than 35 years, I'm going to look at the age column. And so let's call that column above 35. Above 35. And in case you are wondering why we have this kind of variable names, you should watch the Python documentation series where we talked about naming variables. Above 35 equal to Titanic. We have square bracket, and then we call Titanic again, and we pass in that column age is greater than 35. So let me break this down. To select rows based on a conditional expression, you use a condition inside the selection bracket. And so this is the condition here. We want to look at the place where all this age. Remember, this is going to be a series, right? If you haven't forgotten. And we're saying that we want to look at that series and we want to get the result of the ones that are greater than 35. So it's more like just scanning through the entire series of this age, that column age, and looking for the ages that are greater than 35. And I'll show you what happens behind the scene just soon. But the condition inside this selection bracket, Titanic age greater than 35, it checks for which rows the age column has values that are greater than 35. Now, I'm going to run this first, just so you see what we get here. Above 35, as you can see, if we look at the age, you can see we have these ages that are greater than 35. Now, but I'm going to run just this part of this code so that you can see what's really happening. When I run this checks for which rows are greater than 35. As you can see, it just returns false, true, false, false, false. So all those places you see false, there are places where the age is not greater than 35. And the places where you find true are places where the age is actually greater than 35. And so if you look at this is index 1, right? And let's look at here. As you can see, we have this index 1 printed out for us. And it says that the age is 38. And that shows clearly that the age is greater than 35, just as you see here. Let's look at another one. We have, okay, 890, all these are false, and so we may not be able to establish anything here. But as you can see, we have this index 1 printed out for us because the age is greater than 35. And we don't have index 0 printed out, neither do we have index 890, 886, 87, 88. We don't have all those printed out for us. I hope that is clear. Also, we can use equal to, we can use not equal to, we can use other conditional operators. We can use greater than or equal to, we can use equal to, we can use not equal to, we can use less than, we can use less than or equal to. And I hope I'm not missing anything else. Of course, the greater than that we just used now is something that you can also use. So this is actually a pandas series of Boolean values. It's either true or false, with the same number of rows as the original data frame. Now, such a series of Boolean values can be used to filter the data frame by putting it in between the selection bracket, just as we did here. Now, only the rows for which the value is true will be selected. And that's exactly what happened. So if you pass in something like this into, so this is essentially what happened. When you pass in Titanic and you passed in this conditional, this expression, when you pass that expression in, it's just looking for where this Titanic, where this is true. That's what it's looking for. And that's why we have the result as this. It's just looking for place, the rows where this condition is true. I hope this is clear. If it's still unclear, please do let me know in the comment section. We know from before that the original data frame consists of 891 rows, right? Just by looking at this, we know that it's 891 rows. But now let's see what we have here. How many rows do we have here? So we can say above 35 again dot shape will give us that. As you can see, there are only 217 passengers who are above 35 years of age. Now let's go further by even saying that we are interested. So let's say I'm interested in the Titanic passengers from cabin class 2 and 3. Now, when you have questions like this, just notice that you should, one of the things you should first do is to first know what columns you have to select. Now, this is telling me that we are interested in Titanic passengers from cabin class 2 and cabin class 3. What column am I to select from here? So again, this is where the description, the metadata of your data set becomes very important, because just by looking at this, I may not be able to tell what this is asking me for. This is cabin class, not the cabin number as you have here. This is a class we're talking about. And so for the class, we'll be talking about this P class. That's what we want to look at. And so now that we've known what data, what column we are looking for, let's now assign that to a variable name called class 23 equal to Titanic.head. Titanic, we'll do Titanic, and then we'll pass in Titanic again. Recall that what we want here is just whether it's true or false. We want the P class. Again, remember, this is case sensitive. P class dot isin is a method, and so we need to pass that in. Then we pass in a list 2, 3. Now I know this might be a little bit confusing, but similar to the conditional expression, the isin is a conditional function that returns true. For each row, the values are in the provided list. So if the P class is in this list, it returns true. So you think of this, this gets evaluated to either true or false. If P class is in this list, it evaluates it to true. If it is not, it evaluates it to false. And then we now pass that true or false into this Titanic to give us that data frame. Now, I know this might be a little bit confusing, but again, as you keep practicing and you keep working with this, it's going to be much easier for you. And again, if you have any question, just please let me know in the comment section. So you use that conditional function inside the selection bracket. Now in this case, the conditional inside the selection bracket, which is this Titanic, it checks for whether this P class is either 2 or it is 3. So let's run this. We have class 23, and I'll do class 23.head just to get the first 5. As you can see, we have 0, 2, 4, 5, 7. Again, if I run this alone, what you will see here is true, false. As you see, true, false, true, false, true. So in our result, we should have 0, 2, 4. We should have those indices shown to us. So you can see 0, 2, 4. And that's because this is checking to see if the P class, if we have any values that are in this list here. So this is equivalent to filtering by rows, for which the class is either 2 or 3, or combining two statements with an, we can say we want to also combine it with this operator. This is the OR operator. And the way we do that is, so let's use the OR operator to do the same thing. This is the OR operator. Okay, so let's use the OR operator to do the same thing that we did just now. And the way we do that is, let's say class 23 equal to Titanic, passing that. Now this time, I know that I want to evaluate something here. And so I want to pass in this Titanic P class here. P class equal to 2, right? Or Titanic, again, a parenthesis here. And I think I'm supposed to put this here instead. Or Titanic, we have that same P class equal to 3. So what you see here is similar to what we have here. So this Titanic, the isin operator just checks to see if it's in any of these lists. But in this case, we are saying that the Titanic, the P class is equal to 2, or the P class is equal to 3. So this expression here is the same thing as you see up above there. And if we run this, if we run that cell, we do class 23.head. Again, here we should have the same result, 1, 3, 6, 11, 23. If we go back, so as you can see, we have different results, right? And if you've been following, if you're following along, I just want to show you something here. And this is one of the things you have to be careful with, because if you don't write the correct expression, it's going to evaluate your result wrongly. And so what happened here is that this parenthesis here ought to be right here. And you can see how just a single parenthesis can disrupt or change the result of your analysis. I'm going to run that again just so you see. This is 1, 3, 5, 6, 8. Now I'm going to remove that again and put it here. Notice what we have here, 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, right? Which is the actual result we were looking for, 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, right? But now if I run this one, that cell, and then I run this, we get a different result. Why is that? So this is a different expression, right? And so that's, I just did this so that you can always take note of where and how you use these parentheses. So essentially, just so you understand, this gets evaluated and then it also checks if or this as well. So you think of it like this: it checks if the Titanic P class is equal to 2. If it is not, it also checks if it is 3. But those have to be in parentheses, just so that this result can get evaluated at once. I hope that is clear. Okay, so when combining multiple conditional statements, each condition must be surrounded by parentheses. And that's one thing you should take note of. When you are combining multiple conditional statements, make sure that you surround each condition by a parenthesis, just as we did here. This is another condition surrounded by parentheses. Moreover, you cannot use or, and, but need to use the or operator and the and operator. So you can't, I mean, for those who do Python, you might be thinking, okay, maybe I can do something like this. If you do this, you get an error, right? Similarly, you can't do and. This will not work. So what you can use is either this operator, which represents or this operator, which represents and. If I run this, it's going to run, right? That's very important for you to take note of. So let's continue from here. We want to, let's say I want to work with passenger data for which age is known. So I want to work with only those passengers where I know their ages. So I know their age. So you can see here, the age of this passenger is not known. And that's why you have this NaN. So how do we work with only passengers for which the age is known? The way to do that is age no NA equal to Titanic. And again, we call that Titanic and we call age here. We say dot not NA. And if we run this and we do age no NA dot head, as you can see, we have passengers now for whom the ages are known. Now the not NA function that you see here is also a conditional function that returns true or false. So if this is not NA, it returns true, and so it gets printed out. Now it returns true for each row that the values are not null value, and as such we can also combine it just as we did here with the selection bracket to filter the table. Now you might wonder what actually changed. The first 5 lines are still the same values, right? You might be asking that question, but I can't see anything that changed, right? Because it's still like we have the first 5 lines still being the same values. So how do I know what changed? Again, this is where shape is very important. So you can do age no NA dot shape, and that will give you this. Again, shape is an attribute, just as you see there. All right. So the last segment that we would probably look at in this video is how do I select specific rows and columns. Now we've looked at how to select specific columns. We've looked at how to filter rows. Let's see how we can combine both of these together. So what we want to look at in this section is how do I select specific rows and columns from a data frame. That's the question we want to consider. Now, for us to do this, let's say we are interested, in the names of the passengers older than 35 years. Now, if you look at this, we need just the names, right? We need only the names. That's at least that's what the question tells us to do. We are interested in the names of the passengers older than 35 years. And so you think of, like I said, one thing you should always do is what columns am I going to use? What columns am I to use to solve this question? That is one of the things you first want to think of. And here I can see that names is one of those columns. I can also see that this is talking about older than 35 years, and that has to do with the age, right? And so I think for now, I think that the variables I'm going to use, the columns I would use are name and age columns. And so to do that, let's say we call this variable adult names, and we pass in again, we call that Titanic. Now, in this case, you might be wondering, okay, we know how to select age that is greater than 35, right? And so how do we select the name after we've selected that? So in this case, a subset of both rows and columns is made in one go. And so just using selection bracket is not going to be sufficient any longer. So we can't just use one bracket here, right? Because the way we select column is different from the way we select, we filter rows. And so because of that, because we're looking at rows and columns, this is where loc or iloc comes in handy. And these two operators are required in front of the selection bracket. So when using the loc or the iloc, the part before the comma is the rows you want, and the part after the comma is the columns you want to select. And so let me just demonstrate this for you. So for this, now we have established that we cannot use just the square bracket is not enough, because we're looking at the rows and columns, right? That's the first thing we've been able to establish. Now, the next thing is, okay, now we know we can use .loc. Now, inside .loc, we'll pass in that the first thing we consider is the row we want to filter. So Titanic, we need all the columns where the age is greater than 35. Right? That one we've sorted out now. The next thing is the column, which again, you separate using this comma. So what you have here deals with the filtering of the rows, and what you have here has to do with the columns. So what column do we want to select? Just the name. And so we do this. If we run this now and we do adult names, adult names.head, what do we have? We have those names. So these are the names of the passengers. These are the first 5 names of the passengers older than 35 years. So again, let me say this. To filter rows, we don't need the iloc. To select a specific column, we don't need the iloc. We don't need the loc. But to filter rows and to select a particular column, we're doing this together, we'll need the loc or the iloc. And the part before the comma, which you see here, this has to do with the rows that we want. And the part after the comma has to do with the column that we want to select. Now, when using the column names or the row labels or a conditional expression, use the loc operator in front of the selection bracket. Now, for both the part before and after the comma, you can use a single label. And you can use a list of labels. You can also use a slice of labels. You can use a conditional expression. You can use a colon. Now, using a colon specifies you want to select all the rows or the columns. So let's have a few examples here. So let's say I'm interested in rows 10 till 25 and columns 3 to 5. How do we do this? So again, we can do Titanic.iloc. Now that's to say that we want to use the integer location, right? So we do iloc. Now we asked for rows 10. Now if what we need is rows 10, we would have to start at 9, because recall that the index starts at 0, right? And so by the time you want to select rows 10, you're asking for the 9th index. And again, this is very important for you to take note of. Okay. And for columns, again, we have 2 through 5. If we run this, look at what we have here. And so these are the, as you can see, the indices. We have 9, but this is the 10th row. This is the 10th row. Although it's index 9, but it's the 10th row. And this is columns 3 to 5. Now again, a subset of both rows is made in one go. And so using that square bracket, the selection bracket, is not sufficient. And so when you're specifically interested in certain rows or columns based on their position, and again, so you know the differences between the loc and the iloc. For the loc, you are not looking at the specific position. When you use the iloc, it means you're interested in the position. You want to select something based on the position in the table. And so you use the iloc operator in front of the square bracket. Now, but when selecting specific rows and columns with loc or iloc, new values can be assigned to the selected data. And so let's look at this, for instance. We can say something like Titanic.iloc 0, 3, 3 equal to anonymous. And if I run this and I do Titanic.head, I run this. As you can see, we now have the names of the first 3 passengers as anonymous. And as you can see here, we have this location. This is 0, 1, 2, 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's why we have the name here. So this 3 here is for this column. And this 0 through 3 is for this row, starting at index 0 all the way to, but not including index 3. All right, so there are other choices of indexing that you might want to use, and there are different ways you use. I mean, iloc and loc goes deeper than what we've looked at. But just to recap, things to remember: when you're selecting subsets of data, square brackets are used. Now, inside these brackets, you can use a single column or row label. You can use a list of column or row labels. You can use a slice of labels. You can use a conditional expression or a colon. When you select specific rows or columns using loc, when you're using the row and column names. And this is a big difference that you would want to take note of. So if you look at when we use loc here, we used the row and the column names, right? Now, when you're using the positions in the table, as we have here, you should use the iloc. And so this is one of the differences between the loc and the iloc. And it's good for you to know the differences between the two. Use loc when you are using rows and column names. Use iloc when you are using the positions in the table. And as you also see here, you can assign new values to a selection based on the loc or the iloc. And that's it in this video. I'll see you in the next one, where we look at how do we create plots in pandas. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.